right, back in James chapter 5 and James's condemnation of the rich. And as we've read this passage, it's clear that he's not just condemning carte blanche all people who have wealth, but what I would like to call the unrighteous wealthy who have gained their wealth by illegitimate means, unethical means, taking advantage of other people, not treating their neighbor like they want to be treated, and then after the fact, using their money selfishly and not caring about those who are less fortunate. Okay, surely that fits into the context of the rest of the Bible. And James exposes one primary way, apparently, that the rich during his time were getting rich. They are hiring laborers to work in their fields to harvest their crops, but then they weren't paying them. And so, that is terrible. I mean, you talk about exploitation of the poor. That's, at the top of the list there. What can we learn from it? Well, hopefully we don't have to learn from that. I hope I don't have to say to anybody watching now, if you hire somebody and they do the job for you, make sure you pay them. I mean, goodness gracious, that's, ethics 101. However, there are other more subtle ways that the poor are exploited and people are exploited and people make money off the exploitation, and many Christians are either unaware or blissfully ignorant of these things. I'll give you one example. When you invest money into a mutual fund, which is a basket of companies, usually 20, 30, 40, 50 companies per mutual fund, picked by the mutual fund director, you're in partnership with every single one of those companies. You're helping to make it possible for them to do whatever they do. And so within that mutual fund, if there are companies that do things that God hates, you're helping those companies do things that God hates by investing in them. And then worse yet, you're profiting, if they're making a profit, from those companies doing things that God hates. Right? Okay. So the companies you're part of are exploiting poor people in third world countries, through slave labor in garment factories. Well, you don't want to be a partner with them. You don't want to have any part to do that. And so I don't know. I just advise Christians, to look for socially conscious mutual funds if they're saving for their retirement or something, or for some legitimate purpose, or to invest in just huge stocks in businesses and that aren't producing anything that God would hate. Okay, and there are plenty of legitimate businesses. And again, you're not responsible for all the decisions of all the people within every business that you might own a stock in. But boy, if they're clearly producing a good or a service that is evil, well, you don't want to be part of that. Okay, and there's lots of evil out there to be aware of. So if you're going to be an investor, be an educated investor. Probably the best thing of all is just lay it all up in heaven, then you don't have to worry about it. But even that, you need to be an educated giver as well, lest you just waste your money giving it to con artists. Okay, and perpetuating poverty by your goodness. All right, so now we're back in James chapter 5, and let's keep on reading here. After he condemns them for their illegitimate way that they were gaining their money, he said, you have lived luxuriously on the earth and led a life of wanton pleasure. And so again, your standard is so much higher than everybody else. It's characterized as luxurious living and wanton pleasure. You're not even having to work because, you got your field, you hire the laborers one day and you sell your crops, then you don't pay your laborers and you just sit around and eat grapes, on your couch. God hates that. Okay. And he goes on, you have condemned and put to death. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped one clause. You have fattened your hearts in the day of slaughter. What a picture that is. Verse number 6, you have condemned and put to death the righteous man. He does not resist you. And I don't know if that's a reference to what he was just talking about, how you haven't paid your laborers, but that's a way of putting the people to death, isn't it? You hire people and you work them hard and then you don't pay them. Well, that's a slow murder, isn't it? Okay, and perhaps there's more implied by that. James had earlier on said, is it not the rich who blaspheme the fair name by which you have been called, and they personally oppress you and drag you into court? So there was obviously a contingency of rich people back in their day that were the devil's guys. Okay, and I've also thought, that it's quite possible the reason that James didn't qualify this much in verse number 1 when he said, "Come now, you rich, weep and howl," is because the only possible way to get rich back in his day was by some unscrupulous means of taking advantage of people and so forth, unlike in modern countries where we have the rule of law, at least to some degree. And I'm not saying that there isn't corruption and all that, but what I'm saying is you at least have a fighting chance that a person, by legitimate hard work and using their brains and efforts, can, improve their lives and begin to prosper somewhat. And I think it's quite possible, in fact, I think I'm almost positive of this, that certainly wasn't the equivalent of what we would have had back in the ancient world. Okay. And there are still many countries like that around the world. In places like India, you're born into a certain caste, a certain rung on the social strata. If you're born into the untouchables caste, the Dalits, you have very little chance of ever rising above that because of the societal evil that is part of the fabric of that culture. And again, plenty of evil in the country which I live too as well that keeps people down and doesn't give them a chance. But at least there's some degree of chance in what is known the world over as the land of opportunity. Okay, all right, next time we're going to talk about the coming of the Lord and being patient, waiting for that. So you be patient and we'll get together and we'll talk about being patient for the Lord. See you next time.
HeavenWord 7 is made possible by the financial support of viewers like you. Thank you.